Why isn't this? Okay. Welcome back, everybody. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. This is. Oh my gosh. I know. Okay, so I guess I'm just gonna have to start this without this working. Wow. All right, so welcome back to another week, another episode of my show. I'm Jordan, and this is Taking a Different Perspective, where I talk, discuss, review, and analyze all things film and media. So, is it at all possible that these new Oscar changes aren't a singular sign of the next filmpocalypse? No? Okay. Is it at all possible that these changes shine an even bigger light on the film industry as a whole, as well as our own contradiction-filled humanistic perspective on things like art, as well as, just problems with the Oscars and the film industry as a whole? No? Well, okay. So if you didn't know already, the film community has really kind of been up in shambles ever since, well, it's been up in flames ever since it was announced last Wednesday that the Oscars would be making some changes to their award show. They landed on 3 changes, to be more specific. So the first one being that the 3-hour runtime is that the Oscars will actually have a 3-hour runtime, where because of this time change, certain categories will be relegated to commercial breaks, with the winning moment being edited to be aired later in the program. The second change, this will happen in 2020, is that the award show will be aired earlier in the year, where instead of the regular late February, early March viewing, it will now be an early February viewing, where I believe they have already said in 2020 it will be aired the weekend after the Super Bowl. And then the third change is the big kahuna, okay, the piece de resistance of all of these changes, and that is the fact that they will be adding an outstanding popular film category to their program. And this is the thing that has the film community up in arms. Now, before we really dig deep into the situation, I first want to talk about why these changes are even happening in the first place. Well, the most simplest answer that I can give you all has to do with money. And this, isn't really a huge surprise, because as we all know, just about every problem that we have in this world can be reverted back to money. But so for the Oscars, their ratings have actually been going down for some time now. In fact, last year, it had hit an all-time low at around 26.5 million viewers. Now, that may sound like a good number, but if you compare it to years past, it's a 20% drop from a year earlier, 39% drop from 4 years ago, and then a 50% drop from 20 years ago. And, that's not good, especially seeing as though the Oscars generate around 83% of the Academy's $48 million revenue. So this award show is pretty much the Academy's cash cow. Now, besides that, looking at a bigger picture, the ABC actually has broadcasting rights for the show until 2028, and this runs them around $75 million a year. I don't know if you all know, but ABC, out of all of the 4 big networks, is the only network that doesn't have some kind of NFL package. And so, they're not able to reap any of the benefits that come from, being associated with the NFL, or, being associated with the biggest televised moment in America every year, that being the Super Bowl. And so the Oscars are pretty much ABC's bread and butter. And so when they saw these ratings drop, they were like, we really need to get to the bottom of this. And so they landed on a couple of conclusions after they looked over last year's award show. The first being that award show fatigue could very well be a real thing. With the Oscars airing in in late February, early March. That is usually around the time where award show season is pretty much wrapping up, right? So people have been, for the past couple of months been watching, all these award shows that run 3+ hours long. And so, once you get to the Oscars, it's just like, maybe people are just tired. Now, besides that, there's also the fact that the Oscars are known to be this really long, drawn out thing. So the length of the actual telecast. Last year's show was almost around 4 hours long. Now, I watch the Oscars, right? I watch it every year, but I'd be lying to you all if I said that there weren't certain parts of the show in which I tune out of. And I'm way more invested than, say, someone like the average viewer who may only be watching a certain year because, a certain movie may have been nominated. Now, for the average viewer, seeing as though the Oscars are really going after them, they're really not worried about people like me who they know are going to watch, whether it's 2 hours long or 4 hours long. But seeing as though, they're really going after that average viewer, to them, 4 hours to sit through something that probably isn't even the most entertaining thing that they could be watching at that time. And then also, taking into account the fact that more than likely they haven't really heard anything about these movies that are being awarded. It's a lot. And, a lot of people may not want to, like I said, sit through, that length of time. And then, of course, the times that we're in are also a big factor. So, the Oscars are not the only award show to suffer from a ratings drop. In fact, I feel like after any kind of big award show, there's always some kind of article the next day that talks about how how this was like their least viewed telecast ever. So this isn't an Oscars problem. This is an entertainment industry problem. Our viewing habits are completely different from 10, 20 years ago. They're a lot more fragmented. The culture that we are a part of, it's not like this one like monolithic thing anymore. And so, for us, it's like, even though back then, right, we may have all been able to come together for certain things, it's like now, why would we actually sit through something that's 4 hours long when we know that, we can just, catch what's happening in real time on Twitter or see everything that happened the next day on places like YouTube. Now, besides that, people also prefer TV over film, right? So TV's been killing the game within these past couple of years, but film hasn't. So this then gets into another conclusion that the Oscars came to, and that is the fact that these movies that are being recognized are really not that popular. As we all know, Oscar movies have come to be known as this niche art house drama kind of thing that the average person may not really know anything about. In fact, if you were to look at last year's award show, so there were 9 Best Picture nominees, and if you were to get the average box office for all of those movies, it came out to around $78.5 million. And then if you were to actually sum up the total of the grosses of those movies, it would show you that it's actually the lowest gross for nominated movies within the past 6 years. Now, it didn't always used to be this way. There was a point in time where the Oscars would go to more popular movies, but that was when the big studios were actually making those kinds of movies. But now, as we know, their attention is elsewhere. And so the Oscars have had to turn their attention elsewhere. And then, of course, add in all of the social ills that are plaguing the Oscars and Hollywood as a whole. So, sexism, racism. And then, of course, we can also throw in the fact that you have people on the right that are getting tired of the left and all of their preachiness and things like that. And it spells recipe for disaster. And so that's why we're getting, these changes like the 3-hour time span, which I don't really have a problem with. I mean, yes, certain categories won't get the same amount of airtime, which then leads to the presumption that, that these categories aren't as important as others. But I mean, let's be real again in the eyes of the average viewer, because again, that's what I said. That's where, that's who the Oscars are really going after. It's not. Now, granted, I know that in the grand scheme of things, all of these things hold equal weight or just about. And so, like I know something like sound plays a huge part in these movies. So something like sound mixing and sound editing is really important. If it's messed up, then the people are going to notice. Also, something like special effects, you have to make sure that, if your movie uses them, that they have to be on point. Of course, things like hair and makeup and all those other things that go into, making a movie are really important. But at the same time, 4 hours is a really long time to sit through something. And besides that, right, you all know, that you tune out during the actual telecast. So what actual, categories that you care about and ones that you don't really care about. And so, to me, it's like when I hear about all this stuff, it's like, so what if in the name of adapting to the times, and our ever decreasing attention spans, that certain categories don't necessarily get as much televised time as other ones. At the end of the day, you're still being nominated for an Oscar. If you're lucky, you actually get to win. You get to go up, receive the Oscar, and give your speech in front of the people that quote unquote matter. Because that's actually another thing that I've seen people saying, as there is for their argument against this whole against these changes, is the fact that the Oscars have never been for the people anyway, and so it's always been something that's for, of, and by the industry. So why should we even have an outstanding popular film category when, like I said, it's not for or meant for the people. But I mean, yeah, and so to me, it's just like the fact that you have an Oscar should be the thing that you all are focused on. So what if we don't necessarily get to see 45 seconds or however long, the Oscar speech is, we only get to see like 5 seconds of it. I mean, so what, we more than likely wouldn't really be paying attention to it anyway. And then, I mean, besides that, there are also other award shows that don't televise all of their awards. So, I guess it was just about time that, that the Oscars really kind of caught up. Now, in terms of the whole moving up of the air date, that's something else that I don't really have a problem with. And I say that more from a viewer's perspective, because I do think that this is more of a problem for the industry, because they are the people that are going to have to adapt to this new time change. Now, looking more specifically at the movie industry, with the nomination announcements and voting now happening, well, once this move update happens, they will be happening in late December to early January. And so what that then means is that the actual weeks between nomination day and the Oscars is going to be shortened, right? Because if they're moving up to early February and nominations and voting are coming out in late December to January, that's not really a lot of time. And so this can actually have an effect on the revenue for some of those movies where by them just getting some kind of Oscar nomination is enough to help boost their box office numbers. Now, besides that, with nominations coming out in early January, you also have those movies that, we're hoping for those Oscar nominations to help with their box office numbers that now have to also compete with the holiday season, which is now being, like taken over or dominated by big franchises, right? So that's a hurdle that they didn't necessarily have to deal with that they're now going to very well possibly have to deal with. Now, in terms of this outstanding popular film category, I've seen a lot of points being made, but I've also seen a lot of pretentiousness and hypocrisy at play. So let's just go ahead and unpack all of that. So it is clear as day to everyone that was involved and that isn't involved, and that's just, a viewer like me, that this was all done for ratings. ABC has been wanting a best blockbuster category for some years now. So this is definite pandering at its worst. And so, it is disheartening, to see this category being created, not necessarily for artistic merit and achievement, but because a certain movie being nominated means that more people will probably watch. Now, besides that, the Oscars are known for being about, awarding the craft of movie making, whereas the gross or the popularity of the movie is just, it's the product of all of that. Those things did not go into the actual movie making. But I say that to say that I do think that something can be said about a piece of art that appeals to the masses. And so, yeah, I don't really subscribe to the thinking that something being popular isn't an artistic achievement in and of itself. Yes, more than likely when something is more mainstream or when it's more popular, it more than likely appeals to the lowest common denominator. So it may not, be the most sophisticated thing. And I also know that, especially as of lately, when you look at something like, say, the movie industry, that it doesn't necessarily equate to a movie being of quality. But everyone is their own individual, right, with their own set of beliefs, behaviors, and experiences that have gone into shaping what it is that they like and don't like. And so I do feel like being able to, capture a mass audience, knowing that everybody goes up for different things, while also knowing that it probably would have been smarter for them to go after a more niche audience. And then, whether through promotion or word of mouth, right, it would have, the movie would have spread and gained a lot more traction. But yeah, I do think that it's enough to say that there is some kind of artistic achievement in, gaining that kind of popularity. Now, does it actually equate to, artistic achievement in terms of a movie's cinematography or, the editing or the writing or things like that? I personally don't think so, but I still, do feel like my point stands. I don't see people out here trying to downplay someone like Michael Jackson because he was able to appeal to the masses. If anything, that was one of the things that, I feel like made his artistry seem that much more valid within the eyes of, everyone around him. Now, of course, it does bring into the equation the factor of the quality of the artistry, and one of the reasons as to why Michael was so amazing was because his quality was so top notch. And I know that that is a problem with a lot of mainstream movies, is their lack of quality or their lack of artistic integrity. But like I said, my point still stands. Now, I know that I've kind of gone off on a bit of a tangent, but going back to the initial point that I made about how people are saying that this outstanding popular film category isn't based on any real artistic merit or achievement, I honestly have to laugh at that point because of two things. One, the Oscars and the industry as a whole has always been based on this marriage of not only art, but commerce as well. And then two, the Oscars themselves are not solely based on artistic merit and achievement. So looking at that first point, with this marriage of art and commerce that really lays the foundation for, the Oscars and the industry as a whole, that is the way in which these industries are able to, stay alive. It's through those profits. That's why, we have to buy tickets when we want to go see a movie in a theater, or, if we want to get it on demand, we have to, rent or buy it, or, that's why we have to pay for these streaming services, or, we have these award shows that then bombard us with all of these ads, right? That the profits is how, like I said, they stay alive. And so it's no surprise that an industry award show that is at its core about art and commerce, and that was created from an attempt to shore up profits, help with Hollywood's reputation while also protecting them from unionization, would create a category like this. And in fact, this isn't the first time that the Oscars have done something like this. I mean, they've been doing this in their, they've been around for like 90 years now. They've been doing this pretty much since the very beginning. But I mean, just going back to a few years ago, like 10 years ago, back in 2009, when they decided to expand their Best Picture category from a possible of 5 nominations to 10 nominations. A lot of people like to think that that was probably because, The Dark Knight and Wall-E were snubbed for Best Picture the year before, but that was all more than likely done, as a way to try to ensure that more people would tune in because more movies are being nominated. It all has to do with money at the end of the day. Now, looking at the second point about the Oscars themselves not solely being based on artistic merit and achievement, well, this is a known fact. This is something that I talked about already on the show. I don't remember what episode, but I have talked about the Oscars and I have made this point. But what happens outside of the movie is just as important as what happens in it. And so when I see people saying things like, oh, well, it takes away from the value and the prestige of the awards, and, it's not conducive with the Oscars brand, I really just have to look at you, because the Oscars made it this way. When they made it, okay for these various marketing campaigns or whatever else that goes into, whatever else that goes into this Oscar season to affect the way in which people vote, that's just what's going to happen. And so this isn't some new phenomenon. I mean, even going back to the very beginning, the guy that created the Oscars, I believe they said his name was Louis B. Mayer. He went to the Academy and he said, okay, so I know that you all chose for this certain movie to win Best Picture, but I want for this other movie to win Best Picture. And sure enough, they chose the other movie. Now, actually, while I'm on the topic of, talking about back in the day, how many of you all actually knew that there were 2 Best Picture categories, Outstanding Picture and then also Best Unique and Artistic Picture? Now, I'm actually upset that the Oscars only kept these 2 categories for the very first Oscars, and after that, they went to just having that Outstanding Best Picture category, because I do think that they were onto something, and something tells me that, if instead of having this Outstanding Popular Film category, the Academy had just brought back this Best Unique and Artistic Picture, that people wouldn't be so up in arms about it, because I do feel like one of the big problems that people have with this category is the fact that it has popular in its name, and people feel like popular has this kind of negative connotation to it. Now, besides that, I also feel like subconsciously people are upset because, they don't really know the criteria for this category. They haven't put out, the Academy has not said anything that's going to go into how they're going to say whether a movie is popular or not popular. And I actually think that was really smart, because, it has people talking, right? People are invested. I do think that, if they play, I guess you could say the PR, right, that more people are more than likely going to tune into this next award show. But yeah, something makes me feel like that the Oscars really, like, they did all of this on purpose. They knew that them putting out this kind of category would have the film community just like their heads would start exploding and things like that. And so, yeah, but Besides that, I thought that I would go ahead and continue spilling a bit more Oscars tea, because I don't know if you all know this as well, but the Best Picture category is actually not voted on by majority vote. They actually do this thing which is called preferential balloting, where, okay, so I just want to make sure that you all are paying attention, because this explanation can get a bit confusing if you're not paying attention. But I think I know that I understand it enough to be able to explain it to you all. So basically what ends up happening is, and we're going to use last year's award show as an example. So basically what preferential balloting is the Academy hands out these ballots to all of their members. And they tell them to rank the movies from 1 to 9. Well, because remember, I'm going along with last year's telecast. So there were 9 nominees. They tell them to rank the movies from 1 to 9, with 1 being their top choice and 9 being their last choice. And so in order for a movie to win, it needs 50% of the ballots plus 1 extra ballot to have that movie as their number 1 choice. So let's say, so what won last year? The Shape of Water. So The Shape of Water needed to have 50% of the ballots plus 1 ballot as their number 1 choice in order for it to win. But let's say that a movie does not reach that 50% plus 1 ballot threshold when they first count up the ballots. So what then happens is, okay, so let's say that I, Tonya, has like 6% of the votes. Let's say that Call Me By Your Name has 11% of the votes. Let's say that The Darkest Hour has 15% of the votes, and Lady Bird has 20% of the votes, right? Nobody's reached that 50% plus 1 ballot threshold. So what then happens is they take that movie that has the lowest percentage, in this case, that being I, Tonya, they take that movie, they take that movie, they get rid of it. And they take all those ballots that had I, Tonya as their number 1 choice and then redistribute it to based on their second choice. So say for me, I voted for I, Tonya as my number 1 choice. But then because I, Tonya is no longer in the running, they then look at my second choice, which let's say is Lady Bird. And so they then cast my vote for Lady Bird. And they keep doing this until one movie gets that 50% plus 1 vote ballot. And so, yeah, apparently this was all done as a way to reflect the wishes of the greatest number of voters. But, you know, I'm sure that after hearing that, you know, if you didn't know this, because when I didn't know this, I found this out like a couple of months ago. But yeah, when I found this out, the category was looking a bit funny to me, you know, because it's really interesting to put things into perspective, to see that, you know, it's not necessarily based on the most liked movie as much as it's based on the most generally liked, you know, and more oftentimes than not, the movie that is placed second or third on a lot of people's ballots is the movie that will probably end up winning. And so going back to my point, you know, when I see people basing their argument as to why this is a bad category on things like, well, it goes against tradition, it devalues the award show is supposed to be about awarding the best of the best in filmmaking, I just honestly have to look at you sideways, because, you know, it's anything but. With all that being said, I do feel like there is one particular argument that I do feel like holds merit, and that is the fact that this category could very well be discriminatory. You know, the Academy, instead of, you know, rethinking their elitist criteria, they were just basically like, okay, let's create another category that doesn't threaten what it is that we've already established, right? So it feels like a kind of separate but equal kind of thing. And so what if, you know, in the future, once this category has been implemented and things like that, and we've had winners and things like that, what if this category actually sees way more diversity than the Best Picture category? That seems like that could very well happen. And because of that, to a lot of people, this feels like the Academy's underhanded way of continuing to snub films. And so because of that, what it does is that it continues to widen, or people say that it continues to widen this gap between high or low art or pop versus, you know, pristine cinema. But I think that therein lies another problem with me with that particular critique. Because, you know, it's not like we already don't subscribe to that kind of idea that pop or mainstream is bad and that a more niche piece of art isn't. And I say that because, well, I say that, because the proof is in essentially how, you know, people have reacted to this category by saying that, you know, devalues the award, or by mocking it, saying, okay, so what's next? Is the Oscars going to have a Best Kiss category? You know, it really shows that you all are reinforcing the very thing that you're fighting against. And I don't want you all to think that I'm distinguishing myself from, you know, from the larger community, and that, you know, I think I do kind of subscribe to that idea that that mainstream or pop art may not necessarily be as good, but I don't think that there is an inherent lack of value in something that is pop or mainstream, right? All pop or mainstream stuff isn't bad. Granted, yes, a lot of pop or mainstream stuff may be bad, but also a lot of non-pop or non-mainstream stuff is also bad. Now, besides that, the fact that we also don't have any criteria for this category yet, as I've already said, I feel like, you know, you all kind of jumped the gun with the outrage a little bit. Granted, I'm sure that you all probably guessed correctly when it comes to possible criteria, maybe being centered around box office numbers, or you know, the critical reception, or even pop culture awareness. But like I said, because we really do not know exactly what this category is going to be based on, yeah, I feel like you all may have, you know, just jumped the gun a little bit with your outrage. Now, besides all of that, I do feel like there's a big problem that no one has really talked about. And I feel like that's, and like I said, I feel like that's a problem because we should be talking about, and that is the problem of Hollywood, because, you know, Hollywood has really been getting off like a fat rat. You know, everything that has been happening with the Oscars and these changes can all be traced back to Hollywood. Now, as I've already mentioned already, you know, bigger, more mainstream movies used to be nominated and actually win awards back in the day. If you were to adjust these movies for inflation, 9 of the top grossing pictures of all time were all nominated for Best Picture, and 3 of those movies actually won. But that kind of movie-making magic from big studios, right, those kinds of movies, like if you were to just go back and look at the kinds of movies that were being nominated for Oscars back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it's just, that doesn't really exist now. And so, you know, that's why we're getting these, you know, art dramas and these niche pieces, most of which people you know, don't really know about, or they don't really, or these movies don't really become widely available to them until at the very least after nominations are announced. And so, you know, what we see now is, you know, the Oscars, much like with MoviePass or much like with Netflix and, you know, these other companies that are coming in and doing some kind of disrupting. This isn't to say that this new Oscars category is doing any kind of disrupting, because it's basically doing the opposite right there. The industry is pretty much benefiting from this new category. But, you know, what we see is that they're having to go out and create something that essentially makes up for Hollywood's shortcomings. And I don't think that's right. You know, I do feel like everybody's anger is a bit misplaced, you know, because we should really be focused on Hollywood and demanding better from them, because they're the ones that are focusing more on the commerce than the art. They're the ones that are okay with creating movies that we all know aren't necessarily Best Picture Oscar worthy. And so, you know, like I said, what we have is the Academy that is attempting to adapt. And so I don't think that, you know, that they should be condemned as much as they are. They should be condemned, right? And I do think that instead that the Academy should focused on, you know, on possibly changing their elitist criteria, or how it is that they define art, or maybe even, you know, adding in other categories. But I'm also not extremely upset at this outstanding popular film category either. You know, whether you want to admit it or not, there is a disconnect, but it goes so much deeper than just the Academy wanting to create a category just for ratings. You know, it is an industry problem that needs to be addressed, that starts at the very top of the chain, and that is something that we should never forget. Even though I still love film, right, and I still look forward to the Oscars every year, and I will continue to do so, I'm still going to call a spade, right? The Oscars have been broken since the very beginning, if we're gonna, you know, keep it 100. And so, you know, yeah, it's always been about bolstering the film industry. And so when you have a film industry that is more focused on spectacle and getting butts in seats, what do you then expect from an award show that is meant to bolster that very thing? So yeah, with that being said, that will end today's episode. Hopefully you enjoyed what it is that I talked about today. Hopefully I put you on to some, you know, some new information about this whole Oscars situation, just the Oscars in general. If you enjoyed what it is that I said or talked about today, well, I do the show every week from 12:30 to 1 every Tuesday. In terms of next week's show, I'm thinking it may be a review episode, but I'm not entirely sure, so don't hold me to that. But yeah, that, like I said, that's the end of today's episode. And if you had any comments, questions, or concerns about anything that was talked about today, hit me up on Twitter at JRDI or on Facebook at JordanChisley, and we can get some conversations started. But yeah, with that being said, that will end today's episode, and I will see you all next week. All right, bye.